Hi, this is Mike Regan with Transact's 2-Minute Warning for the week of November 7th. And in this week's 2-Minute Warning, we've got a news flash. Your supply chain may be more vulnerable and at risk than you realize. Recently, I was interviewed by my good friend, Adrian Gonzalez, who puts out a great publication, Talking Logistics. If you're not a subscriber, sign up. It's free, and he has some great information about supply chain and logistics stuff. Now, the reason Adrian asked to interview me was because he had heard about the talk that I've been giving for the past year, and that talk is something we've covered in the 2-Minute Warnings, and challenges shippers to ask, are we taking our supply chains for granted? So Adrian wanted my thoughts about, A, our company's really doing that, and what happens when that occurs? Well, with respect to, are they actually doing it? I mentioned to Adrian that most C-level executives don't want to acknowledge that they're taking their supply chains for granted. After all, your supply chain is 12 to 20% of your sales dollar. So why would I want to take something like that for granted? But when people challenge me on, I'm not taking it for granted, I ask them 3 questions. Do you have a written supply chain strategy? Have you mapped your supply chain? And have you stress tested your supply chain? If the answer to those questions are all no, no, and no, you're taking your supply chains for granted. Now, I've also talked about the fact that during my talks, I ask people to rank their supply chains on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being awful, 5 being world class, 3 being average. You know, less than 10% of the people say they have a supply chain that's better than average. Folks, that's stunning, but here's what really drives that. When you have a supply chain that you're taking for granted, you are putting your supply chain under more stress than it needs to be, and your supply chain may well be more vulnerable and at risk than you realize. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I said there's a list of things that we've prepared for shippers. You could simply ask for it, and it would be things that ought to be on your radar screen. We had people download it. They got back to me, said, wow, we didn't know this was happening, but now that you've mentioned it, yeah, we need to plan for it. Folks, if you haven't downloaded that, you may be a company that's taking your supply chain for granted. What are some of the things? Well, the likelihood of a UPS strike in 2023, the likelihood of a rail strike after November 19th, the situation at the ports, the cost of diesel fuel. I could go on and on. You need to download it if you really care about your supply chain. Now, at the end of the day, one of the other things you can do is take advantage of some of the other free resources. On November 15th, we're hosting a great webcast with our friends from CSCMP and the Knit League. It is all about negotiating in strategies around sourcing events. We have Chris Caplice and Kevin Smith that are fabulous resources that are going to share some valuable insights. If you're not signed up, once again, you're taking your supply chain for granted. I know, you've got all the great excuses. You're too busy, you're too that. But at the end of the day, if your supply chain's important, send me an email, check out transact.com, because with each and every 2-minute warning, we're here to remind you we are on your team. We're here to help, and we're passionate about seeing you be successful. Now get signed up for that webcast on November 15th.